today we're going to not go too deep, but we're going to try to understand the obligation of prayer. How do we handle this obligation? We're going to see whether it's problematic, whether it's not, and we're going to take it from there. So the obligation for prayer actually comes from this week's Parsha. It's the second paragraph of Shema. What does it say? In the second paragraph of Shema, it says, "V'haya im shamoa," if you're going to listen to my commandments, "Tishmeu el mitzvotai, asher anochi metzaveh etchem hayom," that I command you today to do what? "Le'ahava et Hashem Elokechem," to love the Lord your God, ule'avdo, and to serve Him. That's the word. From here we know the commandment of prayer, to serve Him. How should you serve Him? Bechol levavchem, with all your hearts, bechol nafshechem, with all your might, all your soul. And if you do that, then v'natati mata artzechem, I will give the rain beito in its time, yoreu malkosh, ve'asafta deganecha, ve'tirushcha ve'etzecha. You'll be able to collect your crops. ונתתי עשב בשדך לבימתך ואכלת ושבעת. I will give food for your animals, you will eat and you will be satiated. This is the second paragraph of Shema. We read every day many times. Source number 2, this is from Talmud Ta'anit. It says, the Tanya, it quotes the verse and it says, "Le'ahava et Hashem Elokechem." It says, you should love the Lord your God, ule'avdo bechol levavchem, and to serve Him with all your heart. And the Gemara explains, Eizu hi avodah shehi balev. It says, what do you mean serve with your heart? How do you serve with your heart? What kind of service is with heart? We know there's many kinds of services to God, but what is the service of the heart? Hevi omer zot tefillah. So the Gemara says, learns that service of the heart, what is it? It's prayer. It's davening. Let's continue. So let's go for source number 3, where it describes prayer in the biblical time. Where do we see prayer in the Torah? So we see that prayer in the Torah in a couple of places. The first place we see prayer, it says, "Vaye'atar Yitzchak leHashem," and Yitzchak prayed to God, lenochach ishto, opposite his wife. We're on the third paragraph. Yitzchak prayed to God, opposite, corresponding on the other side, opposite his wife. Why did Yitzchak and Rivka pray? Ki akarai, she was barren, she couldn't have children. Vaye'ater lo Hashem, and God answered to him. Vataha Rivka ishto, and then his wife Rivka became pregnant. So this is a place where we see prayer in the Torah. When did Yitzchak pray? When he needed something. When he needed something, he says he wanted his wife to get pregnant, he prayed to God. That's the first example where we see prayer. It's not the first example in the Torah, but it's the first example we're going to deal with that we see prayer. Let's see another part. Another part is when Yaakov is going back from Haran and he's going back to Eretz Israel, and Esav is waiting for him with 300 men, with 400 men, about to attack him. And again over there we see prayer. Let's look inside. Vayomer, and he says, Yaakov Elokei Avi Avraham Velokei Avi Yitzchak. He prays to God with his father Avraham and his father Yitzchak. Hashem ha'omer elai shuv la'artzecha u'lemoledetecha. It says, God, you told me to return to my land. Ve'iti va'imach, and I will do good with you. Hatzileini na miyad achi miyad Esav. And here's the prayer again. He says, save me from my brother, from Esav. Again, so we have two instances where the Torah brings us prayer. One is when Yitzchak wants to have a child, and the second one is when Yaakov asks God to save him from the hands of Esav. Why? Ki yareh anochi oto, he's afraid of him, Pen yavo v'yikani em al-banim. It says he's going to come and destroy my family. Kill everybody over here. So 2 instances where prayer we are introduced to. Another instance of prayer from the Torah, source number 5. Vatakam Chana acharei achla b'Shilo. And Hannah stood up after she ate in Shiloh. This is the time where the temple was in Shiloh. The temple stood in Shiloh for 369 years, just before it moved to Yerushalayim. Ve'acharei shato, so she ate, she drank. It was a regel. Ve'eli HaKohen yoshev al kiseh al mezuzat Eichal Hashem. At that time, Eli was the high priest. Ve'hi marat nefesh. She was bitter. Again, why was she bitter? Because she was lacking something. She was missing something. She couldn't have children. So what did she do? Vatitpalel el Hashem. She davened to God. Ubachot tivkeh, and she cried in front of God. Vatidor nener vatomar. She made a vow and she said, Hashem tzvakot, he says, God, imraot tiri ba'ani amatecha, if you're going to see in my affliction, uzchartani velo tishkach et amatecha, please remember me. Ve'natata le'amatcha zera anashim, I should want to have a seed come out for me. Ve'natativ le'Hashem kol yemei chayav, u'moreh lo yalal rosho. I'm going to give this person, this child, I'm going to give to God. Don't know it for me, I want it for God. Again, we see she was lacking something. So when she was lacking something, she didn't have something, what did she do? She asked God. So now we're going to look at Maimonides, and Maimonides is going to tell us the mitzvah of prayer, what it is. What is the mitzvah? So let's look. Source number 6, this is from Maimonides, and he says as follows. Mitzvat aseh, he says, the Maimonides says it's a positive commandment. Positive commandment, which means God commanded it. It's one of the 613 commandments. A mitzvah from the Torah, not from the rabbis. It's a positive commandment, lehitpalel bechol yom, to pray every day. And by the way, this is going to be very problematic. How does he know this? How does the Rambam know this? It's going to be debatable. We're going to see soon. Not everybody agrees with him. It's a positive commandment, the Rambam says, to pray every day. And where does he learn it? It says, I can tell it to you, it's one of the commandments. Shene'emar, ve'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem. It says you should serve God your Lord. The word serve. Serve means pray. That's what he says. How do you serve God? By praying. So Rambam explained, Mepi HaShmu'a lamdu, it says, from oral tradition, the land, she'avodah zo hi tefillah, that this is prayer. Shene'emar, and he brings the verses we learned before, ve'lavdo bechol levavchem, the second paragraph of Shema. You should serve him with all your heart. Amru Chachamim, the sages says, Eizu hi avodah shebalev, the tefillah. Which is service of the heart? Service of the heart is prayer. And then the Rambam explains the mitzvah. What do we need to do? So he says like this, Chiyuv mitzvah zo kachu. He says, I want to tell you the obligation of this commandment. What exactly are we supposed to do? Sheyeh adam mitchanen umitpalel bechol yom. You have an obligation to beseech and pray every day. And how do you do it? So there's a system for it. You can't just ask, it's not just a child that gives a phone call up to his father. He says, Tati, I need another $1,000 on my bank account because I'm going to Zeu. No, you first have to call your father. You have to have a discussion with him. You have to thank him for the $1,000 from last week that he sent it to you. You have to be nice. So it says the same thing with God. You can't just go and ask for what you need. What do you need? Magid shivcho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. First, you have to tell God his praises. Ve'achar kach shoel tzrechav. After you say, thank you, God, for supplying everything, then you ask, oh, and I need this, or I need that. Shu tzarich lehem bakasha ubetchina, and that's when you ask for things. Ve'achar kach noten shevach ve'odaya laHashem, and afterwards, he thanks God for giving it. על הטובה שהשפיע לו כל אחד לפי כוחו. On the good that he gave him, everybody according to his abilities. So according to Maimonides, there's a positive commandment. Or, according to the Maimonides, there's a positive commandment to daven every day and ask for your needs. Nachmanides, the Ramban, immediately attacks the Rambam, Maimonides. And we're going to see, hey, something doesn't make sense over here. Let's see. Source number 7, this is Nachmanides. And Nachmanides says, Ve'en nechuna bazeh. Says, I don't agree with Maimonides at all, he says. What he says cannot be. It is impossible. He's going to ask you a question. He says, why isn't it possible? Elevadai kol inyan hatfila eina chova klal. It says, there's no obligation to pray. There is zero obligation from the Torah to pray. There's no obligation to pray at all.
Did they even pray in the old days? Wasn't it just korbanos instead of prayer?
All the examples that we gave was at the time of korbanos. Right? So we see that even though there was sacrifices, there was prayers also. Yeah? So we need to understand. So he says there was no, you're right. You're right with your question. But all the example with Hannah was sacrifices. Abraham gave sacrifices. Yitzchak gave sacrifices. Yaakov gave sacrifices. And they still pray. Right? So it's interesting things. So it says, the Nachmanides says there's no obligation to pray. It's not a commandment like putting on tefillin or like other commandments, like Shabbos. So how can you say it's a commandment? אבל הוא ממידת החסד הבורא יתברך עלינו, ששומע ועונה בכל קראנו אליו. It just, what is it? You should know that every time you ask something from God, He answers. But you don't have an obligation to ask. For example, why do I say you don't have the obligation to ask? When do you ask? When did Yitzchak ask? When he needed something. When did Hannah ask? When she needed something. When did Yaakov ask? When he needed something. If somebody lives a wonderful life, God gives him everything, he doesn't have a desire to give, to ask. Therefore, he doesn't have obligation to daven. There's no obligation to pray according to Nachmanides. So he says, how can the Rambam says it's an obligation from the Torah to pray every day? This is a question on the Rambam. And this is what we're going to be discussing in this class. Okay? Everybody understand the question? Good. The Rebbe brings like this, on page number 5. Huva berambam, the Rebbe says, look, it's brought down in the Rambam, Bereshit halchot tefillah. The Rambam says in the beginning of the laws of tefillah, of prayer, Mitzvat aseh litpalel bechol yom. It's a positive commandment to daven every day. Ve'ekshu alav. And many commentaries ask on the Rambam, what are you talking? How can you say that? Mikama vekama mekolmot. It says tefillah mederabanan. It says davening is a good idea, but it's not a positive commandment from the Torah. It's something the Rabbanan established to say it's a good idea for a person to ask from God things that he needs. Yeah? But it's not a commandment from the Torah. How can you say it's one of the 613 commandments? And if a person never needs anything, he doesn't have a commandment. Rambam, how would you hold this way? Ve'od zot, and it says, and furthermore, שגם לדעת הרמב"ם שהתפילה היא מצוות עשה, you should know that even according to Rambam, that the Rambam says that prayer is a positive commandment, מניין המקור שהחיוב להתפלל הוא בכל יום? It says, you know what, I'll agree with you, Rambam. I'll agree with you, Rambam. The prayer is a positive commandment from the Torah. God said it. But if you don't need anything, then how do you know? Why does the Rambam says there's an obligation to pray every day? Yeah, exactly. Whenever you need something, that's when you pray. If you need something once a lifetime, you pray once. If you need 5 times a life, if you need 5 times a day, pray 5 times a day. Yeah? But it has nothing to do with prayer every day. It's whenever the need arises, that's when you pray. Why does the Rambam says, no, it's an obligation to pray every day? And by the way, it's not... A lot of people ask this question on the Rambam. He says, Rambam, you're inventing commandments. We agree with you, it's a mitzvah from the rabbis, but God never said to do such a thing. God only required to do it when you need something, you have to ask from God, and then it's considered to be a mitzvah from the Torah. But otherwise, it's not a mitzvah from the Torah, it's a mitzvah from the rabbi. It's a good idea. We're not saying it's not a good idea, it's a very good idea, but don't invent commandments. וכבר שקלו ותרו בזה, there's a lot of discussion about this subject, שממה שכתב הרמב"ם שהתפילה היא מצוות עשה, that when the Rambam says that davening, prayer, is a positive commandments, it's only when הרי זה בשעה שמרגיש חיסרון בצרכיו. It's only when a person is lacking something, is missing something, he doesn't have something. שאז המצווה היא שיהיה שואל צרכיו שהוא צריך להם. Then the commandment is for him to ask for things that he needs for. But let's say, thank God, this guy gets everything. Everything is good. So he says, why should I ask God? I don't have to pray. I only have to pray when I'm lacking something. ובנוגע לחיוב התפילה בכל יום, and it says that when the Rambam says there's an obligation to pray every day, הרי כיוון שלא מסתבר לומר. So it says, according to the Rambam, it says something doesn't make sense. He's trying to explain, it says, let things. So according to you, right, when is the mitzvah? According to Rambam, let's say we believe the Rambam. Right? So according to the Rambam, it is possible to have a circumstances whether you pray to God how many times in your life? Only once. The Rambam says, no, it cannot be. It is impossible that a person is required to pray to God only once. Let's say he did it only once in his life. So the Rambam says, no, that can't be. So maybe twice a life, 3 times a life, 4 times a life. The Rambam says, no. You cannot say just when you need. The obligation has to be that you're required to pray how many times? Every day. How many times a day? We don't know. But at least every day. הרי כיוון שלא מסתבר לומר שמצווה זאת תתקיים פעם אחת במשך זמן רב, it says it is impossible to say that you have to do the commandment one time all your life, על כל כך צריך לומר שחייבה בכל יום. You have to say that you have the obligation every day. ולאחרי כל זו, אין הדברים מחוברים די צרכם. And because of that, the things, שלום עליכם, are not understood as much as they are. Do you have a paper right over there? Yeah. We are on page number 5, source number 8. So the Kesef Mishnah is going to try and explain this. So the Kesef Mishnah says as follows. Vedat Rabbeinu. It says, the Kesef Mishnah explains the Rambam. It tries to explain, the Rambam, how did you come with such an idea? Nobody else agrees with you. You're the only one who's saying these things. Why would you say it? So that Rabbeinu shemitzvat aseh min haTorah litpalel bechol yom, that it's a positive commandment from the Torah. To pray every day. Says, how does the Rambam knows it? Mima shekatuv ve'avadetem et Hashem. It says in the second paragraph of Shema, you should serve your God. ועבודה זאת צריכה שתהיה בכל יום. And this kind of service, it's not enough to do it just once a lifetime, just when you need God. It needs to be done every day. שאם אינה בכל יום, because if you don't serve God every day, אולי נוכל לומר שהיא פעם אחת בכל ימיו. Then you can come out with the wrong decision that, you know what, maybe it's enough to pray once in your life. If everything goes well, you don't need anything from God. You know, many people, when he says, God, they come to me, says, Rabbi, I don't need anything. I've got everything I need. Thank God. The family is doing good. Everybody's doing good. What do I need to pray for? You know, somebody whose life is miserable, is lacking something, he needs to pray. But something that everybody goes well, you know, once in a while, you know, maybe I need something. You know, I have a pain over here, so then maybe there's a requirement to pray. But every day? For sure not. So it says, but according to this, it comes out that if a person has a good life, then maybe he should never pray. Or once in a lifetime, when he needs to pray, he should pray. It says, that's impossible to say. You cannot say that the obligation to pray is once a lifetime. That's completely there. וזה ממה שלא יסבלהו הדעת. It says, we cannot say such a thing. ואם כן, so the rest of Mishnah explain, על כורכך החיוב הוא להתפלל בכל יום. You have to say that you have an obligation to pray each and every day. But, אבל אין מניין התפילות מן התורה. So the obligation to pray is every day. How many times a day? There's no obligation. A person has to pray at least once a day. How many times? Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, the 3 prayers? Not necessarily. He needs to pray how many times? Once every day. That's what the Rambam says according to the Kesef Mishnah. אלא בפעם אחת ביום סגי. Once a day is enough, according to the Kesef Mishnah. Let's continue on page number 6. The Rambam says, אמנם ישנו עניין שלדעת כל מוני המצוות, it says there are this thing that everybody who counts the commandments from the Torah, הוא בוודאי מצוות עשה. Says, I'll tell you, you know when? Everybody agrees that there are times that for sure there's an obligation to pray to God. 100%. Everybody agrees. It's a mitzvah from the Torah to pray to God. When is this instance that everybody agrees? לזעוק ולהריע בחצוצרות בעת מלחמה. That there's a time of war, right? Everybody needs to pray. There's an obligation. You cannot say, I will rely on the army. I don't need to pray. You cannot say, I will rely on my wisdom. I don't need to pray. When there's a time of war, everybody is obligated to pray. Of course, they're also obligated to do whatever, they have to do with the army. But there's an obligation by everybody to pray. And that obligation, everybody agrees, it's a mitzvah from the Torah, not from the rabbis. כמו שנאמר, it says like it says, וכי תבואו מלחמה בארצכם על הצר הצורר אתכם וראותם בחצוצרות. It says when there's going to be war, enemy coming to oppress you, you should sound the trumpets. The sound of trumpets doesn't just mean sound the trumpets. Sound the trumpets means to awaken you for prayer to God, to beseech God for your help. Let's look at source number 9, which he brings the same law. This is from the Rambam. מצוות עשה מן התורה לזעוק ולהריע בחצוצרות. It's a positive commandment to sound the trumpets. על כל צרה שתבוא לציבור. Any trouble that come on the congregation, the congregation is supposed to pray. שנאמר, because it says, על הצר הצורר אתכם והראותם בחצוצרות. On the enemy that comes upon you, you should sound the trumpets. כלומר, כל דבר שיצר לכם, anything that oppresses a person. Whenever a person is under oppression, כגון בצורת, for example, there's famine, ודבר, והרבה, or pestilence, whatever there is, וכיוצא בהם, and similar things, זעקו עליהם והריע. People have to pray to God. Okay. And we see this also from the Chumash itself, on the bottom of page number 6, וידבר השם משה לאמור, God spoke to Moshe saying, עשה לך 2 חצוצרות כסף, make for you 2 trumpets from silver, מקשה תעשו אותם, והיו לך למקרא עדד, you will use it to congregate the congregation, ולמסע את המחנות, to bring everybody together for the marching, ותקעו בהם ונועדו לך כל העדה על פתח כל מועד, when you want everybody to come to you, sound the trumpets, everybody is going to come to you, ואם באחת יתקעו ונועדו לך נשיאים ראשי אלפי ישראל, if there's going to be 1 trumpet sound, everybody is going to come to you, ותקעתם תרועה ונשאו המחנות האחרונים קדמה, and then it gives the whole way how the camp is going to walk in the desert, ותקעתם תרועה שנית, נשאו המחנות האחרונים תימנה, the western side, the eastern side is going to travel with 2 trumpets, 3 trumpets, whatever, יתקעו למסעיהם, ובהקיל את הקהל תתקעו ולא תריעו, and you want everybody to gather, there's going to be a different sound for people to know when they're gathered or not gathered, ובני אהרון הכהנים יתקעו בחצוצרות, והיו לכם לחוקת עולם את דורותכם, this is going to be the job of the Aaron, the sons of Aaron, and then he says, וכי תבואו מלחמה בארצכם, whenever there's going to be war in your country, על הצר הצורר אתכם, and you're going to be attacked, והראותם בחצוצרות, ונזכרתם לפני השם אלוקיכם נשת אויביכם. You need to remember God, and then God is going to give you the salvation. So what do we find out from here? נמצא, we find out, שמצד עניין התפילה, כפי שעל פי התורת הנגלה, so if a person wants to do the commandment of prayer according to the commandment of God, not according to the rabbis, according to the commandment of God, הרי מי שנמצא במצב שאינו מרגיש יש לו חיסרון, a person is finding himself in a place where he is not lacking anything. Everything is good. Thank God, everything goes good. There's a lot of money in the bank. The son is doing good, he's getting married. The daughter, she's doing good. She's in university. Everything is good. Everybody is happy. He doesn't feel that he has any lacking. שנוגע ללבקש להתחנן שימלאו את חסרונות. He doesn't feel that he needs to ask God from anything. ואין לו מלחמות. There's no troubles in his life. There's no wars coming upon him. ייתכן שיתפלל כל היום כולו. It's possible that such a person will daven every day of his life. From now, for the next 80 years, he will daven every day of his life. ואף על פי כן, and nevertheless, לא יתפלל מימיו תפילה מן התורה. And he never actually did an obligation from the Torah. It's only obligation from the rabbis. Why it's only obligation from the Torah? Because he doesn't need anything. He's happy. He said, according to what we learned so far, the obligation from the Torah is only when you lack something. If you don't lack it, it's only obligation from the rabbis. So in other words, a person can daven his entire life for 80 years and never do the obligation that the Rambam said is obligation from the Torah, according to what we understand so far. Is that possible? You think that that's actually possible? That a person can go throughout life theoretically and never prayed once? So let's see. Let's go to page 8. In page 8, בעניין זה מודגש ההכרח שבתורת החסידות. Now we're going to come for the importance of Hasidus. What does Hasidus bring into the picture to change this picture completely? כיוון שעל ידה נעשים התפילה וקריאת שמע מצוות מן התורה. When a person learns a little bit of Hasidus, he realizes that not only when he lacks something, his davening, his prayer is a prayer from the Torah, from God, but even when he is not lacking, I'm going to go like this, even when he's not lacking, it's every day when he davens 3 times a day, it's still prayer from the Torah. But he says, according to the Rambam, it's not, so what do we do with it? So let's see how. כאשר יהודי, when a Jew, מתחיל להתבונן בגדולתו יתברך, starts to look at the greatness of God, ומזה בא להבנה והכרה בשפלות האדם, it says, what happens the more you see the greatness of God, the more you realize is how lacking we are. If God is perfection, we are exactly the opposite of perfection. שרואה עד כמה הוא בצמצום מדידה והגבלה. He notices all the limitation that human beings are under. The more you contemplate on the greatness of God, the lesser you will become in your eyes. For example, 2 days ago, maybe a little bit more than 2 days ago, there was a fast, right? All of a sudden comes 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You didn't eat for what? For 12 hours? For 14 hours? And all of a sudden, the person is going like this. He cannot look. If somebody is talking to him wrong, he screams at him. He's become too tired. He cannot do this. He cannot. What happened? You didn't eat for 12 hours or for 14 hours. Big deal. All of a sudden, you can't cope? That's what happens. This is called a person, a creature that has limitation. 14 hours without food and the person is completely gone. כאשר חסר באכילותו, אזי נעשה מיד חלישות בכוח שכלו. He didn't eat for a couple of hours. He says, how do you want me to work? I can't concentrate. I've got a headache. I can't think. Who can think without food? I need energy. וכאשר חסר בשנתו, and when a person only got 3 hours of sleep, immediately he realizes that I can't cope today, I can't do my job, I can't do this, I can't do that. נעשה אצלו בלבול המוחים. It says it's completely gone, he's completely not able to work. ובכלל, and besides that, look how pathetic we are. What do you say with pathetic we are? Human beings tend to think that we're the leader of the universe. We're the leader of the world. Yeah? If I take from you the animal world and the vegetation world, yeah, for a week, how would we survive? In other words, we're even dependent on vegetation and animals in order to survive, in order to function, in order to be. This is how lacking we are. The more a person understands that, he sees how God is perfection and he's the person full of limitation. This is not only coming to talk about physicality, we're also talking about spirituality. What do I mean we're talking about spirituality? כשמתבונן בגדלות הבורא שממנו נלקחה נשמתו, when a person looks at the pure soul that the pure soul was taken from godliness himself, מאיגרא רמא מגג גבוה, how lofty it was before it came down into this physical world, ובפרט כשיודע בעצמו, and specifically when we know, each person of us know by himself, look at your life, look at our life, the way we lead our life. Every day we have a battle within ourselves. We have the animalistic instinct within us that tell us you're hungry, you're thirsty, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need comfort, you need this. And then you've got your intellect on the other hand that tells you have to do the right thing no matter what. And usually who wins the battle? So I'll tell you who wins the battle. 100% of the time, the animalistic instinct is going to win the battle when it's going to be long enough. It's just a question for how long. How long are you going to be hungry? How long are you going to be thirsty? How long would you have the desire for a certain thing? After a while, you know what happens? You will give up. You say, you know you need, there's doctors over here. You have a patient. You need to give him full attention, right? You didn't eat and you didn't sleep. It's only a question of time before you stop giving. You know that the right thing to do is to give him what? Full attention. It's only a question of time before you stop. I don't know how, it depends on the sleep, on the eating. It's 100% you're going to lose the battle. This is called limitation. Yeah, this is what limitation means. The truth is, one knows מי הוא המושל ושולט עליו מבין שני אלו שעליהם אמרו חז"ל. It says the person knows who's the real one who's going to win this war. זה וזה שופטם. You've got the evil inclination, you've got your good inclination. You know where the war is going to be. שלפעמים זה קם וזה נופל, לפעמים זה קם וזה נופל. Sometimes this rises, the evil inclination sometimes rises, sometimes the good inclination rises. כך שאינו יכול להגיע למעמד מצב שתהיה יציאתך מן העולם כי יראתך לעולם. In other words, before the neshama came down into this world, the neshama was perfect. The neshama only wanted to do the right thing. Once it came down into this physical body, what does the neshama want? The neshama wants the opposite of perfect. And we, unfortunately, many times, many days, I would say the majority of the day, on the majority of people, who wins? The evil inclination wins. So when a person realizes it, how limited he is, how without God's help, he's completely helpless. הנה כשמרגיש את שפלות מצבו, when a person recognizes how weak he is, אזי מרגיש את עצמו במצב של חיסרון עצום. Then he immediately will feel a sense of great lacking. If you really look at the situation that we found ourselves in, you immediately realize, you know what? We're completely lacking beings. ובלשון אדמו"ר האמצעין, just like the Mittler Rebbe says, כשנזכר העני והאביון על רוב דרכו, when a poor person remembers that he cannot feed his family, that they're starving, you know what he does? יבכה במר נפשו, immediately he cries. We are on the top of page 9. Immediately he cries. It says, he doesn't take time. Immediately he cries. He can't feed his family. He cannot do the right thing. Of course he's going to cry. His children are dying. וכיוון ששפלות מצבו והחיסורות שנוגעים באמת, it says, why is the poor person really asking from God? Because his children are dying next to him. They are not eating. אזי נעשה אצלו החיוב מן התורה לבקש צרכיו. But our children, our spiritual children, are also constantly dying every day. We are actually, you know what we are? We are the poor person whose children are dying. And they're dying not just in this, only in the morning, only doing shachris, only doing mincha. Yeah? Throughout the day they're dying constantly. If we don't beseech God to help us because we are lacking, there's a war about this body. The evil inclination and the godly inclination by us are at war, and there's war. There's a commandment on us to beseech God to help us within this war. כאשר מתפלל, so when a person davens and he realizes this aspect that we just thought about, אז מקיים מצוות עשה מן התורה. All of a sudden it becomes what? A commandment from the Torah. See, until now we thought it's a commandment from the rabbis. You know when it's a commandment from the rabbis? When you don't realize you're lacking. When you don't realize that you need God. That's when it becomes a command from the rabbis. If you are truly lacking, then immediately it's you ask God to help you. ואז נכללת בזה גם המצווה מן התורה, and then it becomes a commandment from the Torah itself. Just like we learned. לזעוק ולהריע בעת מלחמה. As we learned, when there's the time of war, we are commanded from the Torah to ask for help. שזועק לקדוש ברוך הוא, we ask God, it's only a matter of time before we lose the war. It's only a matter of time. We know what the right thing is to do. It's not like we don't know, but we are weak. We are limited beings. We need food. We need sustenance. We need encouragement. If we don't get it, what we're going to do, we're going to lose this war. We're not going to be able to do the right thing. We are dependent on other things. And because of that, God, please help us. We ask God, שיעמוד לימין אביון, please stand to our right. להושיע משופטי נפשו, because there's an enemy who's coming over us. And like it says, וזה וזה שופטן, כמבואר בתניא, ששתי הנשמות, it says, we have two souls, נלחמות זו עם זו. The animal soul which wants pleasures of the world, which wants comfort, which wants food, which wants sleep, that's one soul. And each soul wants to conquer the body, that the body will become his. והיינו שהיצר הרע לזר אשר בקרבך is the stranger that in you גורם למלחמה בארצכם. He comes every day and every moment of our life. The evil inclination comes to move you from the right decision. There's a war constantly within our life, not just once a lifetime, every second of our life. שרצונו לכבוש את רמ"ח האיברים ושס"ה גידים. He wants to conquer the limbs of the body. And he wants to conquer speech, action, and thought of a person. So this is why, if you look at source number 11, before a person starts to pray, the Alter Rebbe puts in his siddur, this is what one needs to do. This is what prayer is. קודם התפילה, before a person starts to pray. This is what prayer is. The Alter Rebbe says it in one sentence. יחשוב מרוממות הקל, one has to think about the greatness of God ושפלות האדם, and the lowliness of man. What does it mean one has to look about the greatness of God and the lowliness of man? It says, as a man, I'm a little I'm a limited being. I'm a lowly person. And it's only a matter of time before I go against God. Before I don't do the right thing. Why? Because I've got an evil inclination. I'm going to think about my life before I'm going to think about your life. Whether I like it or not, it's just a matter of time when it's going to be. And even if I choose to think about your life, it's a choice which is an active choice. Naturally, if I'm just going throughout my day, I will always think about me first and you second. Always. There is no creature upon this face of the earth that will feel your pain before it feels his pain. And because of that lacking, whatever that lacking is, we ask God, we want to do the right thing no matter what our condition is. That's what we ask God. Let's go to page number 10. The truth is, כדי לעבוד למעמד ומצב שהתפילה תהיה מתוך הרגש, in order to be able to pray in such a manner, what do you mean such a manner? In a manner that you feel you need God to help you in your war, צריכה להיות ההקדמה של אמירת כל פרטי העניינים. This is why, let me just rephrase, when the Torah says that one needs to pray, it's specifically talking about the Shmona Esrei prayer. That's what it's talking about. The Shmona Esrei, the 18, which takes about 3 minutes to pray. If you've ever been to shul, you know that the services take about 45 minutes in a regular day, right? 45, 50 minutes. So it says, 3 minutes I'm willing to do. What's the other 45 minutes for? 3 minutes is easy. That can be prayer. It says, the other 45 minutes are actually a preparation for you to realize that you need God's help. It's, if you will see, which we're going to discuss soon, what are the other 45 minutes are spent on, there's a way for you to realize your lowliness and God's greatness, and that there's a war taking place, and that without His help, you're not going to win the war. It will make you come to the realization. So before you come to this realization, you need the introduction of Matovu, of this prayer of Matovu, you need the introduction of Hodu, you need Psukei de Zimra, you need the blessing of Kriyat Shema, and you need to do it step by steps. Let's look at source number 12. It says, Ki hine hatfila nikret sulam. It says, prayer is just like a ladder. כמו הסולם שעשוי מדרגות, just like a ladder is made out of steps, ועל ידו עולים מלמטה למעלה, and through the ladders you go from down to up, ככה על ידי התפילה עולים מעשייה לאצילות. Also by prayer you're going down into 4 spiritual worlds. The worlds of Asiya, then the world of Priya, of Yetzira, and the world of Atzilus. והיינו, עניין 4 חלקי התפילה. In prayer, there are 4 levels in prayer. עד ברוך שאמר הוא עליית העשייה, until the place where we say ברוך שאמר in davening, this is the world of עשייה, ומברוך שאמר עד יוצר הוא עליית היצירה, and the second step is the world of יצירה, ומיוצר עד 18 עליית הבריאה, and from יוצר until 18, until the 18, till the עמידה is the world of בריאה, וב-18 is the highest world, is the world of אצילוס. ובכל עולם מעולמות אלו יש גם כן עלייה כמה פרטי מדרגות. In each world also you elevate from one level to another. והן כל פרטי הפרשיות והמזמורים שהם פסוקי דזמרה וברכות קריאת שמע ביוצר. And as we're going to see soon what the levels are. We're on page 11. התחלת התפילה היא הודו להשם קראו בשמו. The beginning of the davening is to praise God, give thanks to God, proclaim His name. That this is a general gratitude to the fact that we are here. Kasher, it says, what happens? It says, let's try to understand. Let's take an example. We do the example first and then we read it inside. A person today, I'll tell you, Einstein is right here in front of you. You will appreciate him. You will appreciate his greatness. The greatness of Einstein, you can have a talk with him, a conversation. It will be something that you will appreciate this great man called Einstein. Correct? What about if you're a farmer? A farmer from 500 years ago. Doesn't know who Einstein is. Right? But he knows the people around him. Is he going to appreciate Einstein, the conversation? He's not going to appreciate Einstein because he doesn't realize. He doesn't know how to read and write. Forget. And he doesn't even realize what's good about intellect. He thinks good means strong muscles. That's what good is. He doesn't even realize what the idea of him is. He says, this is the problem with us. We don't even realize the greatness of God. We have no comprehension of what the greatness of God is. It's like almost like imagine telling an ant, this man is greater than this man. It's not relevant. He cannot connect. He says, what do you mean greater? God is God. I mean, man is man. He cannot see anything. This is when we tell ourselves, contemplate the greatness of God. So he says, what is going on over here? How can we awaken in us the greatness of God? That's what we're going to discuss over here. So this is what he's going to say in source number 14. כאשר אין ביכולת השגתו להשיג ולהכיר כלל בעוצם הגדולה והחוכמה כמו שהיא, when a person doesn't have the ability to recognize the greatness of God the way it is, it says, but you know what it is? רק שיודע ומכיר שהוא מופלא בחוכמה. He only recognizes that, you know what? This is something great. וצריך להודות לו בהודאה ושבח גדול. I don't understand. I understand that I need to thank him because everything comes from him. וכמו, it says, and he explains it. שיודע גם העני בגדלות המלך. It says, a poor person, a regular farmer, knows, let's say there's a great king, like Solomon, King Solomon, the wisest of old men. He will know that Solomon is great. So it says, what do you mean? If he sees Solomon in the streets, he will never recognize the greatness of Solomon. He's a farmer. He doesn't know the greatness of such minds. How would you recognize it? So you see, אף על פי שאינו מכיר במהות הגדולה כמו שהיא, he doesn't even recognize the intellect in his mind, אלא שמודה שצריך להודות ולשבח לגדולה זו, הגם שאינה משיגה. But he says, since he's the king, he's going to say, I need to recognize it and to praise him for his greatness. But how does it come about? So it says, והאח היא הדרך לאהבתו ויראתו. But the farmer is so distant from the intellect of Solomon to appreciate even what intellect is. How is it going to come about to appreciate such a thing? What does he need to contemplate on in order to come to this sense that I need to thank? So it says, בשעה שהתבונן האדם במעשיו וברואם הנפלאים והגדולים. It says, at the time that you're going to see the world that God created, how wise the world is, how wise science is. And through the science, through the world, יראה מהם חוכמתו שאין לה ערך ולא קץ. He will see what a genius the thing that created all this universe is. מיד הוא אוהב ומשבח ומפאר ומתאווה. תאווה גדולה לדע השם הגדול. He will immediately awaken in himself a desire to know God. כמו שאמר דוד, just like King David says, שמה נפשי לאלוקים לקל חי. It says, my soul is thirsty for the Lord God. Page 12. And now we're going to understand what's all the introduction of davening, what does it describe? והיא עניין ההתבוננות שבתחילת ברכות קריאת שמע. If you notice, before we say the Shema, it describes all the angels. And it describes the angels completely nullifying themselves in front of what? In front of God. So let's look at the example we do before. The farmer doesn't appreciate Einstein is. He doesn't even know who Einstein is. But you know who he appreciates? He appreciates his father. And he appreciates the leader of the village. And of course, he appreciates the leader of the town that's next to him. And when he sees that the leader of his father and the leader of the village and the leader of the town next to him, when they see Einstein, they all go, ooh, what a great mind this is. He doesn't understand the mind. But you know what he understands? There's something over there that I need to appreciate. And this is what prayer is. Prayer is step by step taking you to higher creatures than you, and it is showing you how those creatures are completely nullified to the God who created them. And when you realize how those creatures who are so much higher than you are completely nullified to God, then when you're going to come and stand in the Shemona Esrei, you will feel, my lowliness is so low, of course I need God in order to do the right thing. Not only I need God, even all those creatures that came before me, the highest angels, the highest governors, the highest kings, they also need God. How much more I do? This is what prayer is all about. So let's read it inside. Let's start from the second paragraph. Let's read it inside quickly. והוא עניין ההתבוננות שבתחילת ברכות קריאת שמע. This is what the introduction to the Shemona Esrei, the blessings of the Shema, comes around. What does it talk about? בעניין ביטול המלאכים לאלוקות, about the nullification of the angels to God. והיינו, שגם המלאכים היותר נעלים, even the highest levels of angels, שהם השרפים, שמעמדם בעולם רע, they are in one of the highest worlds, the worlds of creation, הנה מצד השגתם שמשיגים הפלאות אלוקות, הרי even though they're such high intellect, they're completely nullified to godliness. והתבוננות זאת בביטול המלאכים שרפים ופנים פועלת גם בנפש העמית, שגם היא תהיה בתלכות. So when I see that they're completely nullified to God, how much more it is going to make me, when I see the leader of the village nullified to Einstein, of course I'm going to be nullified to Einstein, because I look at him as Einstein. ועל דרך משל במלך בשר ודם, just like we can say it about King Solomon for example, שגם איש המוני של יום פשוט ביותר, when you got a simple person, אינו שייך שישיג לו את המלך, he would never understand the deep intellect of Solomon, ויתפעל מזה, he doesn't even understand intellect, he never learned anything, he doesn't have a mind of intellect. לפי שאין לו שום מושג כלל בגדולת המלך, he has no understanding on the intellect of King Solomon. מכל מקום, כאשר רואה איך ששרים רבים ונכבדים משתחווים ומתים למלך, when he sees all the great ministers and all the people that he looks up to, everybody completely nullified to King Solomon. הנה גוף אשר רואה את ביטול השרים, when he sees the ministers nullified, הרי זה פועל ביטול גם באיש המוני, he also becomes nullified to God, or to King Solomon. ועל דרך זה גם הנפש הבהמית. And this is the way we need to approach God in our prayers every day. שהגם שמצד עצמה אין לה מושג באלוקות. The godly, one has to understand, our animal soul doesn't appreciate godliness. It doesn't appreciate godliness to a great extent. What do I mean? The animal soul knows, you know what it understands? He understands a good steak. He understands women. He understands comfort. He understands honor. He understands things that he understands. Yeah? He does not recognize that there are higher things than him. But once he thinks, you know what? The animal soul sees, I have intellect. Even the animal soul has intellect. And it sees that there's a type of intellect, a righteous intellect and a non-righteous intellect, let's call it. In other words, let's take an example. Taking care of myself or taking care of the community. Both are intellect. Both of them make sense. But he sees he's nullified. Maybe he's not even going to choose taking care of the community. But at least he's nullified to the fact that there is such a concept. He says, you know what, I appreciate it. And then he appreciates, if there's such a concept, there's higher concept, and there's higher concept, and there's higher concept. So all of a sudden, even the animal soul wants to aspire to be something which is higher than him. מכל מקום, על ידי שמתבוננת ומשיגה, because he sees higher creatures than him, completely nullifying to God. הרי זה פועל גם עליה. You've heard many stories about people who live in the projects. And they never came out of the projects. And once in a while, you will see a small little boy that came out of the projects and is successful. You will always ask this small little boy what happened, and the story will always be the same. There was once a human being that he met, and he saw him behave in a different manner than everybody else. If he never accounted to it, he would never get out of the project. The animal soul has to see someone else nullified. Then it will want things, something different than drugs and honor and power. It has to see it. When it sees somebody else nullifying himself to it, it will want it. Otherwise, without recognizing such a thing, it will never even want it. It doesn't even know it exists. Other things. The same thing with God and prayer. If one doesn't recognize that there's a higher thing than that he's lowly, he will never ask God, and he will never want God. The first recognition of wanting God is knowing that you're lowly. ולבד זאת, in the last paragraph of page 12, הרי ידוע ששורש נפש הבהמית ומשומרי האופנים, we know that the animal soul is the lowest of the lows. ולכן כשמשיג איך ששושו בתלם, when he's going to realize how even he is nullified to the world that is a little bit higher than him, and he imagined the little bit world which is higher, which is a little higher than him, is nullified to the world above it and above it and above it and above it, how much more he would want to go to the source of it all, which is godliness. Let's go to page number 13. ואחר כך בא העניין של 18, and then comes this is only a preparation for 18. And what do we do in 18? In 18 we ask God for all the things that we lack. All of a sudden, until now we thought, hey, my life is going well. Now, after you contemplated everything else that we did, by the time you get to 18 and you realize that even the highest angel is lacking, and the angel below him is lacking, and of course all the worlds below that, they are all lacking, how much more are you lacking? So now when you ask from God, you ask like a poor person, and it becomes a mitzvah from the Torah, not just a mitzvah from the rabbis. וכפי, second paragraph on page 13, כפי שתורת החסדות מבארת ומורה את הדרך להתבונן בעניינים אלו, החל מהתבוננות בהודו להשם קראו בשמו הודיעו ולמלותיו. So this is the progression in the davening, like we explains. אחר כך מגיעים לפסוקי דזמרה, then we have the verses of פסוקי דזמרה and everything else. אחר כך מגיע לברכות קריאת שמע, then he contemplates, first he contemplates how the whole creation, the physical creation is completely nullified to God. Then he contemplates the fact that even the spiritual intellect and emotion, ideas, are completely nullified to God. So let's look at the last paragraph. ואז בכו יבכה במר נפשו. Then he's going to really feel like a lowly person. He's going to cry out for the help of God. מצד גודל התאווה והצמאון להיותו בארץ צייה ועייף למים, because he will feel that I have living in a desert without any godliness. I am so lowly. ובתנועה כזו מתפלל לבורא העולם ומבקש ממנו שירווה וישביע את סמנו ורבונו. And this is how one needs to pray every prayer. כיוון שאינו יכול לסבול יותר, because he cannot do it anymore. He cannot live without God's help. Let's look at this story from page 14, which is going to even more emphasize this point. הרב הקדוש, רבי יצחק אייזק הלוי אופשטיין, נשמתו עדן מהומל, there's a special rabbi from Homel, תלמיד מובהק לרבנו נשמתו עדן. He was a student of the Alter Rebbe. היה גאון בניגלה ובחסידות, was a genius when it comes to Gemara, when it comes to Kabbalah. וצמאונו לדברי אלוקים חיים היה גדול מאוד. And he used to be so thirsty for godliness, עד שהיה זה נוגע לחיות נפשו ממש. That when he didn't get something to think about, to contemplate, he would become physically sick. He would become actually physically sick. ורבותיו הקדושים היו מגדילים אצלו הצמאון. And his rabbis used to make him even more thirsty, because they would reveal a word over here and a word over there, and he would feel that there's something there and he wouldn't have it. והוא היה מרבה לבקשם בפתקאות שהגלו לו יותר. He used to write them letters constantly, reveal more of the secrets. Why? Because it says, if you're not going to reveal it to me, you're making me sick. כי זה נוגע לו עד הנפש ממש. Because it actually affects him to his soul. Actually, fact, this is the way we should be davening every day. You ask, what should you ask for? You ask for God. A person should feel a feeling that the fact that I don't know you, the creation, I don't know the creator, I don't see godliness down here in this world, should affect him to his core. And if it doesn't affect him, the fact that it doesn't affect him should affect him, because it shows how lowly he really is. He is so lowly that he doesn't even care. Imagine a person that is capable of contemplating godliness, and he's not contemplating godliness. ואם היה מצליח בקשתו, היה נפשו לשלל ממש. Every time he would be able to get information about the greatness of God, for him it was a big celebration. והוא העמיק, הרחיב בדברי אלוקים חיים עד להפליא, וחיבר ספרים יקרים, and he became more and more devoted to godliness. And this is not just something that belongs to special people. Each and every one of us should see godliness, first of all, in the creation, which we will call it in science itself. One should search for God in all physical matters, and then in theory, in philosophy, in intellect, in emotions. And if one is not seeking it, the fact that he doesn't seek him should prove to him how lowly he is. ועניין זה שייך לכל אחד ואחד מישראל, and this belongs to each and every Jew, אפילו לפשוט שבפשוטים, even to people on our level, not just geniuses. וגם בזמן הגלות, even at the time of exile. Because what? that שערי אנשי כנסת הגדולה תקנו את נוסח התפילה באופן השווה לכל. The men of the great assembly, they established davening. And they established davening for whom? For creatures like us. At the time of the Torah, people didn't daven this way. They didn't need all this introduction to the Shmona Esrei, because it would come to them naturally. They didn't need to look at the nullification of the ministers, because they were the ministers. They saw the godly light. They were thirsty for the godly light. We don't see the godly light, but at least we can see how the ministers want the godly light. That should awaken in us when we read about the angels, how they aspire to become godlike, how they are thirsty for God and they're not able to. It should, how much more inspire us to be, you know what, I'm missing something. Obviously there's something missing from my life. שעל ידי התבוננות בכל חלקי התפילה, they established through us looking at all parts of prayer, ממה תבוא עד 18, like we mentioned before, כפי שנדברה בתורה השכירות, like it is explained in Kabbalah, יוכל לבוא למעמד ומצב that a person needs 3 times a day before he prays, recognize the fact of all the things that he's missing, all the godliness that he's missing. שירגיש את החיסרון שלו בכל עניינים, that he will feel he's lacking in all matters. In all matters we are lacking. There is not one place of our life, intellectually, emotionally, anywhere, that we are not lacking, that we're not limited, that we don't need God to be there. ואז כאשר מתפלל לקדוש ברוך הוא, then when we daven to God, מקיים מצוות עשה מן התורה 3 פעמים ביום. We are actually going to do a commandment from the Torah 3 times a day, just like the Rambam says. ובא בשעה שיהודי אינו לומד תורת החסידות, and if a person doesn't recognize it, what we just contemplated now, what we just went to right now, it can be a religious person and lived for 100 years, יכול לחיות 70 שנה, he will be able to live for 70 years, מבלי לטעום טעמה של תפילה אמיתית. If he doesn't feel a lacking, if he doesn't see the difference that what he actually needs, he never actually prayed even once in his life. Not even once. So you can have a religious person that doesn't have those feelings we just discussed, lived an entire life, davened 3 times a day, every day, and never actually prayed, because he doesn't feel the lacking that he has in him. Al derech, up to here. Any questions?
I have a hard time with the angels because they're built that way to nullify Hashem, right? It's like a program.
You're right. But the angels, even though they're nullified to God, they are called srafim. Why the word srafim? Srafim means, in Hebrew, it means they burn. It says, what do you mean they burn? They constantly, they're like quarks. They're all the time oscillating between 2 worlds. They are within they're within a certain world, and they always desire to go to the higher world. They have a constant desire to go there. Once they get there, the world becomes so big to them, so it pushes them away. Let's call it. It's called love and fear. They have a love to go up to the higher world, and once they reach there to go to the higher world, the world is so big that it pushes them backwards to their world. So they're constantly in a state of oscillating. That's what they call srafim. So you're right that this is who they are. They always aspire to go higher and higher and higher and higher, yeah? But even in their going higher, right, they go back from one world to another. They go back and forth. So even in them you see the desire to completely want to become completely nullified in the next world, and they're not able to. They have to go back down. They want to, and they're not able to, just like us. We also want to go up to the next world, and our desires, our physical desire brings us to the physical world. I'll give you a simple exercise that you can be religious Jew. You know, we all know that there's hungry people in the world. Right? People are dying from hunger, let's say. Today, less than they ever been through. Do we have the right to buy luxuries when there's hungry people in the world? What does your mind tell you? Do you have the right? Is it just that we live, we buy automobiles, we buy houses, we live in the lap of luxuries, and there's people dying of hunger somewhere? Is that what does it tell you? Obviously it's not. And I'll go even further. Let's say you gave all your money to charity to feed hungry children, and you still have clothing, and you have food for yourself. Is it right that you have clothing without him? You should sell your clothing and give the poor child that's going to die, he doesn't have any food, his clothing, right? You know that it's true. What I just said, no, intellectually, each and every one of us knows what I just said is correct. How come we're not able to do that? It's a constant battle. We are so lowly, we only care about ourselves to such a degree that we're just used to it. But at least we should know that we should aspire to help those people. Whether it is physically, whether it is spiritually, it doesn't matter. At least we should know the truth, what the truth is, and aspire to be it. Not necessarily we're going to be able to come to that level. It's just like the angels. We go up to that level, and then we realize, you know what, it's not for me, this is too much. And we go back to take care of our animalistic ideas. You know what, my comfort comes before his food. That's actually what we say to ourselves every day. Another example that I will give you. A lot of people donate money to the SPCA, to save dogs and cats. How are you even allowed to do such a thing? How is a person even allowed to do such a thing? There's hungry people in the world. There's people who need help. Are you allowed to save cats and dogs, to donate money to cats and dogs and not help those people? Something to just think about, all these things. We're always going to come back to reality. But at least we should aspire to do the right things and start having, this is not today's class, and starting to having a blueprint of how to move forward, so we're going to become, let's say, more true to the idea and not to the animal soul.